I've gone on this seafood diet. Yeah, I see it. I eat it. Yeah, here's another one. Yes. Two parrots sitting on a perch. One says to the other, "Can you smell fish?" Think about it. Yes. And that one was sent in by my Antipodean friend, Mark. Yes. Hello, Mark. Yes. I don't really know how Mark gets on living in Australia. I really don't. You know, I'd get really, really pissed off being upside down all the time. I would. And Mark says he does as well. It's hard going for them because all the blood rushes to the brain and the feet get cold at the same time. Yes. Let's crack on. Okay, so in this week's video, what do I want to talk to you about? As I said in the last one, I want to continue talking to you about the local adjustments that are coming inside Raw Therapee 5.9. And they are very, very in-depth and very, very, very extensive. So I want to try and get a series of videos up so you can hit the ground running when the public release comes out. Or if you want to go and download the development build yourself and work with that. However, the first thing I want to do in this video is give you a little tip. And it's going to come up in your workflow when you're working inside Raw Therapee quite a bit. So if we look at the screen, I'm at 100% on this landscape here. Very dark and dour and gloomy landscape, which one or two of you might have seen before. And if I concentrate on this area of backlit trees, I don't know if video compression's actually going to allow you to see this very well, but we haven't colour balanced the image yet. But you can see we've got a sort of a bluey tinge in the sky, but from where I'm sitting, when we get into the sky behind the trees, and I'm telling you this now because, at least for us in the northern hemisphere, we are going to be soon in winter when all the leaves will be off the trees, and this is going to be quite a common occurrence for you. And the sky in between the backlit tree branches has got a slightly reddish colour cast to it. And as I said, you might not be able to see it with video compression, but if I just go and pick up a spot colour balance, and I have it in a, let's say a 16 by 16 grid, and I just come and click in any of these areas that should be neutral grey, and now you can see the sky's turned neutral, and I'm just hoping now that you can see that slightly reddish magenta tint to the sky behind the trees. Alright, and a quick tip for you if you're in colour balance, if you've got a colour picker up, if you just right click with your mouse once and then right click again, you'll actually go back to your hand tool and you'll drop the colour picker. But we are concerned with this tint shift because, you know, from sort of here to here is quite a long way, but we've actually got the tint showing up right next to it. Now, you can mess around inside the colour balance till you're blue in the face and you won't shift this, but you won't believe how you can easily get rid of it. If you come over to the demosaicing tab and you come down to chromatic aberration, auto correction turned on, avoid colour shift, and yeah, this is a little bit weird because in some circumstances like this, avoid colour shift will actually produce a colour shift. So if I uncheck avoid colour shift, wait for it, and there we go. So now My sky is one homogeneous tint. Yes, so there you go. That was a bit of a top tip. So we will scrap that image now because you don't want to see that. And I'm going to come to this image a little bit later on because this image contains a mysterious gizmo. Yes, it does. It contains an excluding spot. But more of that later. So I'm going to come back over to this image sent in by Gary, one of my patrons. And hello, Gary. This is a shot Gary took up on Dartmoor with a old Canon 5D Mark III. I think it was a 5D Mark III. And yeah, it's sort of the typical sort of landscape that you'll get on an overcast day, where the sky is a whole lot brighter than your foreground. And it can cause some problems. How do you darken the sky without darkening the blooming tree? Now, yes, you can go and put a graduated filter on it in Lightroom, yes, and then try and remove the graduated filter with either a colour range mask or a luminance range mask. But, of course, Raw Therapee being Raw Therapee can do that a whole lot better. So we're going to go over to, well, we're already here. We're going to, because we've got tree branches with sky showing behind. In other words, we've got very tightly grouped high contrast areas and high contrast boundaries. We're actually just going to uncheck avoid colour shift. And I would suggest that you do that for virtually every shot you ever take that's got this sort of scenario going on inside it. And then we're going to head off over to the local adjustments. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is zoom right out, because when I do what I'm going to do in a minute, I like to use as big a spot as is humanly possible. And so I also, so I can see the contrast best, I'm going to switch it over onto a black background. So now that image looks pretty bright because it's surrounded by black. If I go and switch it over onto a white background, now it looks very dull, dark and dismal. And this is why somebody was having a conversation with me about a certain English YouTuber doing a print video, you know, no mess in print, what you see is what you get. And then he had to start adjusting his print or his image to get a decent print out of it. And this is why. It's because the silly bugger always insists on processing his images and trying to soft proof his images on a white background. So, yeah, it's always a bit of a pain in the backside. So I'm switching out primarily to a black background for this specific operation. And I'm going to add a local adjustment spot, but I'm going to show additional settings because I want to change it to a rectangle. Now, the first thing I want to do is to place the spot of this rectangle, and it's quite hard to see because we are out at such a small view. So I'm just going to put it there temporarily. But here's the thing, I like to draw the boundaries out as far as they will go. So I can drag it out, and then it will stop. It won't go any further. And whether this is the way you're supposed to use it or not, I have no idea, but this is what works for me. All right. I'm going to come into a slightly bigger view so I can put this spot where I want it. And I'm just going to put it right in there like that, because we're just concentrating on the sky and I want to make this sky go darker, but I want to keep the detail in the sky. So we're going to now zoom out a bit more. Okay, so we're just on a rectangle, normal spot size default 18, and there we go. So all I'm going to do because I'm just trying to keep things very, very simple in this initial set of videos that we're going to embark on over the next couple of weeks or so. Just trying to keep things really simple. So I'm going to add a shadow highlights tool to this spot, and by default I think it should come up with shadow highlights, seeing as it's called shadow highlights and tone equalizer, but of course it comes up with a tone equalizer. So what we have to do is go and switch it out to shadows highlights, and I'm just going to get the highlight slider and I'm just going to wang it all the way to the right. We might back it off in a minute, and then I'm going to come up to the scope color tools, and we're just going to strike a balance with this scope color tool slider, so that you can see by default it makes things look a little bit tight up here and slightly posterized, and it's not getting down into the distant landscape quite so much as I want it to. So as I move it to the right and increase the scope of the color tools, we get a better balance on the image. Okay, now we can switch from, on this tool, from basic to either standard or advanced. Let's just go and put it in advanced, and that'll bring up this graduated filter and mask modifications. If we have it in standard, no, that's the same thing, because quite often you'll get these tools will have 3 different extents of control panel, depending whether you have basic, standard or advanced selected. But we could actually go and put a graduated filter on here and just do that, but I can't see the point. There's not really any point in that, but that's only on this image. So I'm quite liking what I'm seeing at the minute. Now, the big advantage of having the spot out so wide, or the spot coverage out so wide, is that you can grab that spot and then move it to different positions, and as we move it we will hopefully get somewhat different renditions of the treatment of this sky. So that could be a good place to put it. That could be a good place to put it, but it's not such a drastic change to the sky. But I actually quite like it where it was. So that'll do for me. What I'm now going to do is to come back up to the top, and I'm going to add another spot, and this spot I'm just going to put on this rock here, and we're just going to drag this out. We won't drag this out quite so far, and I'll keep it as a elliptical spot, and just drag it out something like that. Alrighty, and then on this I'm going to add colour and light as a tool, and all we're going to do is just make the foreground come a little bit lighter, have a little bit more contrast in it, and improve the saturation a bit. And then we can go show hide, and then we can flip that out to its default grey, and there you go. And wow, what an adjustment that is. And we can go right into it as 100%, and we can see that we've got nice sharp crisp clean edges. We haven't got any haloing around, and there we go. Look how it's tied in with the leaves on that tree. Now obviously the image isn't finished. We could actually go and put some small spots on there if that's what you wanted to do, or we could take it into the likes of Photoshop and do a dodge burn exercise on it, and just start building out the colour in the tree, putting a bit of variation in the tree, and also putting a bit of variation in the foreground. But I am sure that you will agree that that is a heck of a sight different from how it was before, which was like that. Okay, so that's what we started out with, and that's what we finished up with. So you can see now what I mean about the power of those local adjustment spots. So the next thing I'm going to do is flick over to this image here, and you think, yeah, wow, okay, let's now just go over to our local adjustments and delete these 3 spots. And there we go, there's our starting image. And yeah, I mean, it's a bit pants. It's a sort of shot you do for your local rag when something's going on. And yeah, the curse of all blooming outdoor photography, a cloudless blue sky. So how are we going to tackle this image? Because what I want to do is I want to lift up the brickwork, I want to lift up the buildings in general and just make them a bit pokier, and I also want to do something with this sky. Now, we're not going to replace it, but we're just going to make something of it by making it a little bit more richer. All right, but the only thing is I don't want to have those adjustments on this clock. Yeah, because this clock is actually not that colour blue, and it's not that colour blue really. It's a little bit more like Wedgwood blue, and so I don't want to really go over the top on the saturation of that clock. And yeah, so anyway, let's get on. So I'm going to add a spot, okay, and I'm going to immediately drag this up into the sky, and we will actually zoom out so we can see what we're doing, and we will just drag out, like that. And you can see, because of the layout of the delimiters, we can't, no matter what we do, we can't really cut this clock out. We could do 2 spots, I suppose, but then you've got problems trying to balance the adjustments on the 2 spots. So either or, we've got this wonderful thing called an excluding spot, which can get us out of all sorts of little nasty problems like that. I'm just going to have a short slurp of tea. I live on tea. And none of your fancy green leaf tea or peppermint tea either. Proper builder's brew. Yeah, but I don't always have sugar. Anyway, so to this spot, the tool I'm going to add is this one. Vibrant and warm cool. And why have I chosen that? It's because it's the cleanest one to use for this particular job. So all I'm going to do is lift the vibrance, and I might just make it go a little bit more blue, and wait and see it sort of paling off down there. We just pull the filter down a little bit, rather like that, will help out there. And if we go show additional settings and I come into transition gradient and I go to transition value, that will just help bring the blueness down closer to the roofs or roofs of the buildings. Yes, it will. Alrighty, so I'm going to hide the delimiter and the spot just so we can see its effect, and then I'm going to come in with another adjustment, and I'm going to leave this on the brickwork, and I'm going to go show additional settings because I want to increase the spot size, because I not only want to lift the bricks, but I want to lift the joins in the bricks as well. And that spot actually selects what tone and colour is going to be adjusted. So I want to take in quite a scope of various oranges and browns. And then we're just going to stretch this out. And so it encompasses everything that I want to lift up, rather like that. And then you have to get in a certain frame of mind when you are using these local adjustments, because they are very, very similar. I don't know if you've ever used software before with U-point technology in it. This is very, very, very similar to U-point. It's a little bit like a very strong genetic mix favouring U-point with a little bit of Lightroom's local adjustment powers thrown in to good measure. for good measure. So it's a bit of a hybrid, it's a bit of a bastard. Yes. So there we go. Now, to do the job I want this spot to do, the tool I'm going to use is Colour and Light. And Colour and Light is fantastic. And we're just going to use it in its basic form. So we're not going to switch it out to standard or advanced. And all we're going to do is lighten up. See how much control I've got over the entirety of the scene, other than what's blue. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? So we're just going to lighten it up a bit, and then we'll just add a bit of saturation to it, rather like that. And that's made the whole thing sort of come to life. So I'm going to hide that spot as well. And then we're going to come into the image at 100%. And this is off an old D2XS, this is. So there you go. Now then, the only thing is, if I go and turn local adjustments off, see what that clock looks like? I want the clock to look like that, but I want the rest of the image to look like that. So what we're going to do is use an excluding spot. So we're going to add a spot, show additional settings, and we're going to switch this from a normal spot to an excluding spot. Yes. Exclusion. Now you can see where the spot is placed. You can see what it's done. It's fundamentally taken the brickwork underneath it back to where it was before we added any local adjustments. So now you can sort of see what an excluding spot does. Right, so I'm going to bring this excluding spot into the clock, and I just want to encompass the shadow of the clock fingers as well. And we'll just lift up so we can see what we're doing. And all I want to do is to bring the delimiters in, just so as the sort of around the clock, rather like that. And then I need to bring up this bottom part of the delimiter, and we don't really need to get super duper close. Now, the only thing is that we can't really see what it is that we're doing, and I don't know if that's a little fault in the dev build or not, but when we hit preview AE, yeah, remember we used that in the previous video when we were adjusting the hazard warning light on the tank. Hazard warning, I love it. But because we haven't got a tool attached to this spot, when we hit preview AE, we can't actually see the spot itself, or the mask, for want of a better description, contained within that spot. So all I'm going to do is very simply add a tool which by default doesn't do anything unless you make an adjustment. So I'm just going to throw the first one on there, Colour and Light. Now remember, in the previous video, when we've got preview AE active, we know that if we can see our image in monochrome, these are the black and white, we know damn well that the spot is not having any effect. Where we can see the green lith, which is sort of like red ruby lith, I suppose, we know that we are having the desired effect. Now then, all I'm going to do is just come to this excluding slider here and scope, and we're just going to increase the scope. And I don't know if you notice there, you just watch up here, you'll see it just suddenly clean up just that little bit more. Ostensibly you think that looks monochrome, but if I just increase, can you just see how that bit there just went just that little bit more monochrome? And so, you know, I mean, what we could do is increase the scope of the actual colour tool itself and see if that makes any difference, but I don't really think it's going to. And so if I turn off preview AE, now you can see that I've got my clock pretty much back to the existing blueness that I wanted. So if we just activate Preview AE again and just see if we can get any difference. I don't think we can. I think that's looking a-okay. Maybe just increase the scope. This spot structure, let's just turn up the spot structure. Not really making much of an effect, but sometimes you will find that that will just sort of tie the green back in and show you and really make sure that you're blotting out or you're punching a hole through those other two localized adjustment spots. You can sort of think of local adjustment spots, dare I say it, as layers in Photoshop. You can sort of think of them as layers. And then what we've done is we've punched a hole shaped by this clock, in other words, shaped by this green tint that we're looking at in Preview AE, and we've just punched a hole through those two layers so we can see the original colour of the clock, rather like that. So we'll just go Show Hide, and we'll take this back to a Fit to Screen view, and there we go, there's our image. You might want to do other stuff to it, I don't know, but anyway, there you go, guys and gals. That's another basic lesson on the basics of the new local adjustments inside Raw Therapee Dev Build and the soon to be released Raw Therapee 5.9 public release. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed that video. I hope you've got something useful to it. If you've liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, leave a nice comment below if that's what floats your boat and you want to tell me what a good and clever person I truly am. If you've got something nasty to say, as ever, keep it to your bloody self. Hit the subscribe button, do the thing with the ringety-tingety bell, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, tooroo.